Director Larry Stransky.
Yes.
Director Richie Wasserman.
Here.
Director Tess Albin-Smith.
Here.
Director John Haschak.
Here.
Director Rex Jackman.
Here.
Vice Chair Michael Carter.
Here.
And Chair Dan Jurdy.
Here. It's maybe a staff function to, we have the election of chair and vice chair at the first of our agenda.
Yes, good afternoon. It's good to see you all back again. So this is the annual meeting where we elect the chair and the vice chair. So we have a pretty simple process based on Robert's rules, and I'll walk you through that. Essentially, we want to collect any nominations for those two offices, and then I'll ask for a motion and a vote until one passes. So to start out with the office of chair, I'd like to hear a nomination or one or more nominations for the office of chair, and we do not need a second for that.
I'll nominate Dan Deary for the chair.
All right,
I second that.
okay. Any other nominations? Hearing none, the nominations are closed for the office of chair. Now I'd like to hear a motion and a second to elect the chairman.
I will so move.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay. All in favor of re-electing Director Jurdy as chairman? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. The Chairman Jurdy is re-elected. Thank you. Now, for the office of vice chair, are there any nominations for the office?
I'll nominate Michael Carter for vice chair.
All right.
Second.
Are there any other nominations for vice chair? I guess not. Hearing none, the nominations are closed. May I have a motion and a second for electing the vice chair?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All right. All in favor of re-electing Vice Chair Carter?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, Vice Chair Carter is re-elected. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that concludes that election. Thank you very much.
Okay, now we're on to agenda item number 3, which is to momentarily convene as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency, then recess and reconvene as the Policy Advisory Committee with Caltrans participating. And we'll now move into public expression. Public comments are welcome. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. And we cannot deliberate to a great extent on public comments, but we can hear them and answer without going into great debate on it. We, at the end of our meeting, we also have, or near the end of our meeting, we have reports from directors, and that will be an opportunity for directors to respond to a greater extent possibly on the items brought up by members of the public. So now is an opportunity for members of the public to talk about things that are not on the agenda, and we'll hear what you have to say.
I can come up.
Hello, I'm Gail Richard from Fort Bragg, and I'm here to speak for the redwood tree. And excuse me if I get emotional. And basically, this is about the Highway 20 logging at Camp 20. And it's a safety project for Caltrans. And I feel that they didn't allow us proper notice to protest it. And I think it's a senseless project because I think people need to slow down. They're going way too fast. There's no highway patrol hardly ever on that road. But I'm going to read the letter that I put in the Advocate. It's in the paper this week. And it says, if you haven't seen the complete annihilation and devastation of our beautiful redwood trees and others, east on Highway 20, across from Chamberlain Park, part of Jackson State Forest, it will make you physically ill, as it did myself on January 22nd, 2020. After some research, I found the culprit to be Caltrans at 1656 Union Street, Eureka, California, and the phone number. I spoke with their public information officer, Bonnie Kuhn, who says the reason is they have had 2.5 more collisions at the curved part of the road. There's more information that maybe this gentleman can give you that I got after I wrote this letter. So people are getting killed, basically. I don't know exactly how many over 20 years in that part of the road. Anyone who drives Highway 20 knows there is virtually very few highway patrols, so people drive way too fast, won't pull over, and sometimes, no matter how fast you're going, it's never fast enough. Speed is the #1 killer, and that causes accidents. The answer is not cutting trees down. It is to increase highway patrol and for people to slow down. Is Caltrans going to move every mountain and cut every tree down on every curve because people drive too fast? What kind of common sense is that? And why weren't we informed? That I said 215 trees, that was originally what it was. It's 115, 85 are redwoods. Since then, I've talked to Frank Dimling, he's the project coordinator, and he's given me more statistics about it. And why weren't we told about it? I mean, we were notified by public media on, let's see, I think it was the 6th, January 9th. Let me see, I've got it in here somewhere. January 9th, 16th, and 23rd, the day they started cutting all the trees down, which they did in 6 days. Okay, so, I'm sorry, just a minute here, please. Okay, and why weren't we informed that 115 trees were going to be cut down? And why isn't anybody who knows anything about it doing anything? I'm told that in 2018, the Willits paper had a small article in the corner of the paper. If Caltrans needs to cut trees, then why don't they cut the hundreds of beetle-infested trees everywhere? And I asked, please write and express your heart and help stop the craziness. And I am outraged, I am disgusted, and I'm brokenhearted. You know, I moved to Fort Bragg because I love the beauty of it. And what happened to the scenic corridor? If we don't speak for our trees, no one is going to, and they're logging them faster than anything. At least protect the scenic corridor. Get more pullovers off the highway and pave them, because people won't pull over on rocked pullovers because they're afraid of sliding, they don't want their cars damaged. You know, we have to protect our trees. Where they're doing this, if you could see, there's a small bridge there, and then it's quite a long way along Chamberlain Park, which is a straightaway, and it goes 20 feet in that they cut. And I don't see why they have to put a freeway there. I mean, to me, it's a freeway. Frank says it's 12 feet wide. I don't know. But they don't have to massacre that many trees. You know, they replant, I understand that. But, you know, we're not going to be around in 100 years. And, you know, it's senseless what they're doing. And I'm asking you to please speak for our trees. That's what makes where we live so beautiful. And I thank you for your time. I hope you'll consider stopping the craziness.
Well, do appreciate the fact that you came all the way to the meeting today. And on our agenda, the time that Caltrans has to talk about their updates is later in the agenda, so I don't know if you're able to stay for...
Oh, I'm going to stay.
Okay,
I'm
right.
here to fight for my trees.
Okay.
And could somebody turn up because I can't really hear that well. Is there any way of making it a little louder? Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other public comment?
Good afternoon, Chairman Jurdy and members of the board. My name is Diana Clark, and I'm the director of the Ukiah Senior Center, and I'm also the designated representative for the other 4 senior centers on the MCOG Social Service Transportation Advisory Council. I wanted to share with you some good news today that the Ukiah Senior Center just learned from MCOG staff that our 5310 grant application for a new wheelchair-equipped passenger van has been preliminarily granted, and it approves our passenger van request will be fulfilled by Caltrans this spring. We're very grateful to the MCOG board and to staff members for having supported this Ukiah Senior Center's 5310 grant request last year. With the acquisition of this new wheelchair van, we will be able to fulfill an unmet need of longstanding that will now allow us to reach seniors who were previously inaccessible to our larger buses. As we approach discussions for the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget, the Senior Center subcontractors seek MCOG's continued support for the funding of our transportation programs through the allocated TDA monies. During this past year, MTA appeared to be considering the termination of its contracts with these 5 senior centers. Rather than fulfilling unmet needs, the termination of the Senior Center transportation contracts would unnecessarily create new unmet needs and would jeopardize the higher level of door-through-door transportation service that the senior centers currently provide to Mendocino County seniors and disabled adults. The recently completed MTA triennial performance audit for the years 2016 through 2018 indicates that for the subject 3-year period, the senior centers continued to meet 3 of the 4 MCOG performance standards, whereas MTA was meeting only 1 of those 4 standards as it concerns dial-a-ride. This underscores the importance of keeping the senior center transportation contracts with MTA in place for fiscal year 2021. Contrary to MTA's representations, dial-a-ride is not the same as the senior center's door-through-door bus service, which our mobility and memory-impaired seniors depend on for their safe transportation needs. During 2018-2019, the senior centers collectively provided 34,456 bus rides to seniors and disabled adults, compared to dial-a-ride's 27,250 trips. So the senior centers provided 21% more rides for seniors and disabled adults than dial-a-ride. The senior centers transportation programs are vital to keeping our senior centers connected to the many services, programs, and activities that enrich the lives of our seniors through the local senior center facilities. Accordingly, we respectfully request that the MCOG board continue to support the funding of the senior center transportation programs through the local transportation fund monies that will be awarded in fiscal year 2021. Thank you very much for your consideration of these matters.
Do we have any other public comment? Come on up.
Good afternoon. My name is Monica Quiroz Rivera. I'm going to preface my statement by saying that I do not drive. I have never driven. And so public transportation is of great considerable interest to me. I should also let you know that I went back to school after 40, and I relied on public transportation from San Benito County to San Francisco State University. I spent 1 semester there but couldn't stand it, so I did public transportation, got up at 3 o'clock in the morning to catch a bus out of San Benito County to the train in Gilroy, and then took it all the way to 4th and Townsend, and then took another bus, and then the Muni to San Francisco State. Public transportation is very important to me. There is an item on your advisory report about Wednesdays. I use dial-a-ride. There are times when I can walk to the bus stop that is just probably about 3 blocks away from me, and then there are other times when my niece says, "You damn fool, go call the bus." So on Wednesdays, the service is very, very bad through dial-a-ride. And I've been told that it's because I'm competing with the senior center. There's no service for the seniors. I'd really like for you to take a look at that, to maybe coordinate something just a little bit better to offer better service on Wednesdays.
Excuse me, I think we should have this, hear this item under the public hearing. so that we can
Yeah.
accept it as testimony.
Right, was your intention to provide testimony as part of the
I
unmet
can't-
transit needs?
I can't stay. That's why.
It's the next thing we'll be doing, so,
Can't we just fudge a little bit, because I have to go, I have another appointment.
Did you have something that you could turn in? Oh, no, that was the agenda. I wasn't sure what you had in your hand.
No, I was reading the agenda and
Got it.
the packet.
Okay.
So anyway, I thank you very much for listening to me. Like I say, public transportation is just very, very important to me.
okay.
I think one thing that those of us that take public transportation are doing our little part in saving the earth and saving Mendocino County.
I might suggest that you come to an MTA meeting. Our MTA staff is over there. You might talk to him about the next meeting and where it is. And that's where that starts, the unmet needs.
All right, sounds good. One final thing, I have to say this. I'm relatively new to the county, okay? So I think I've been here about 15 months. You should all be very proud of the dispatchers and the bus drivers, because to a person, they are very kind, they're very polite, they're funny, they know how to make you smile. You should be very proud of them. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other public comment on non-agenda items? Okay, we'll go on to our regular calendar and our public hearing on unmet transit needs for fiscal year 2020-21, including Social Services Transportation Advisory Council recommendations of December 9th.
I'll take that one.
And please let me know when we should open the public hearing. Is it after
Yeah.
the staff report, I assume? Okay.
Yes, first I'd like to have a finding of proper notice. We did publish a legal notice in 4 newspapers around the county, and that's in my written staff report here. 3 of 4 of those notices were a full 30 days before this hearing today. And so those were in the Ukiah Daily Journal on January 3rd, Fort Bragg Advocate News, January 9th, the Willits News on January 4th, and the Independent Coast Observer on January 3rd. I have the proofs of publication here if you'd like to see them. Otherwise, we'll just report that we did that. And it's been, oh, and also I should notice that we put that up on our website, on MCOG's website, mendocinocog.org, and we emailed the notice to our list of interested stakeholders by email. So we believe these actions more than meet the requirement. And I would like to, as is customary in this body, is to have a formal motion of finding a proper notice.
I also move.
All right,
Second.
thank you. And that could just be a voice vote.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. So I would like to have that hearing open, and I will give my staff report during the public hearing.
Okay. So at 1:54, we'll open the public hearing and finish the staff report and then go to public testimony.
Thank you. So this is that annual hearing that we do to take all of the testimony that we can gather about unmet transit needs. And this starts off our budget cycle. The first thing that happens in our annual cycle is the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council has a workshop, and they bring in all of the needs that they have heard from their constituents. And we have a discussion there, and we don't try to rank or prioritize any of those. We're just trying to develop a list. And at that meeting on December 9th, the SS TAC, as we call it, recommended a list of 18 unmet transit needs, and that is in your agenda packet. The first 5 needs were developed by the SS TAC in the workshop, And they also endorsed 13 more needs that came from Mendocino Transit Authority's board meetings throughout the year when they have public input at their meetings on unmet needs. So that's a standing item that they have. And so we have those 18 needs we'd like to put on the record here today. And after that, we did also hear through public outreach, we heard from 2 different agencies, from Community Care, a nonprofit agency that is also in your packet there, had 3 needs that they asked for, and also from Howard Hospital, generally asking for non-emergency medical transportation, and that was described here in the packet. So without reading through all of these, I'd just like to summarize the kinds of needs that are coming up. And there's the non-emergency medical transportation, as we mentioned. Just more trips on the major highway corridors that are already existing services, additional stops in some of the towns, and also weekend service. And I see there's also some seasonal types of service that's been asked for, and generally connections outside of the county and to some of the more remote areas of the county. So you can see our list. We could have a discussion of those if you like. And what we would like to do today also is hear if anybody else today wants to add to this list. And once we've heard all of the testimony, we would like to have this board take action to direct the list to Mendocino Transit Authority for analysis. So today we don't need to decide if these meet the definition. You do have the definition here in your packet of what is an unmet transit need. And it's generally whenever a need to transport people is not being satisfied through existing public or private resources. That analysis will come next after today's hearing. And that will, once we have a report from MTA, that goes to our Transit Productivity Committee, and they will discuss that and make a recommendation to this board on any needs that are considered reasonable to meet, and that's a formal definition. That's also here in your packet. So that is the process. Are there any questions about that?
I would really like to say that I talked to the Thiele on the one about Howard Hospital. And we really need something to be done with the patients that do not have vehicles to get places one way or the other. And they're being discharged and to get home, or they need to get, to the emergency room or whatever. And I asked her if there was anything in that MCOG could do about that, because we have physicians that are actually calling me and asking me to see if something can be done about it. And so that's why I called the Thiele and went
Well,
from
that's interesting. I think it came up both in our workshop and from Howard Hospital directly. Nafili, you spoke to the people at Howard. Is there something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I spoke to Ace Barish at Howard Hospital and to get an understanding of what the need was. He did say that they're interested in starting a service of their own to fill that need, because they don't feel like the other services that are available really serve their need for their patients. He is interested in pursuing potential grants, and I told him that we would, could look into some grant options for them. But the first step, I thought, was having it included in the unmet needs process. So that's why it's included today. So we'll be following up with them about what potential grants might be available.
And you'll also notice that the SSTAC meeting minutes are in your information packet here. And so that details the conversation. I noticed that Willett Senior Center Director has spoken with the Adventist Health Howard Hospital about non-emergency medical transportation, and they talked about possibilities of contracting for those services, and the vehicles are pretty costly, so, you know, they'd be interested in some kind of a grant. And then we also did hear directly from Howard Hospital that they're thinking of possibly doing that service themselves. So that is something that's under discussion. It's
Go ahead.
definitely
I
on the
just,
list.
right away, what flashed in my mind was Portland, where they have the gondola car going from the bottom to the top, up to the hospital.
Yes.
And then I started thinking about our climate committee and how we're trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so if there's a shuttle and it's on the ground, then I would hope that we encourage them to do an electric, some sort of electric van or some sort of, I mean, I would love to see a gondola car, but I doubt that's ever going to happen in this flat area, but possibly. But something that would, you know, we're looking at very needed transportation, but there's a lot of trips going back and forth to that hospital. So how can we minimize maximize the convenience of it and get them to the main central area where they can catch a real bus? Or, no, that's my point.
Yeah.
Director Hashak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Another issue is that in Covelo, they're talking about closing the bank in Covelo, the one bank. And so if that happens, there's going to be a lot of need to make those trips into Willits, which would be the closest bank. And so I just want that to be considered also.
So their service to Covelo is identified as a need in the list under needs identified by Mendocino Transit Authority. So I think
Right.
that should fit within that,
Yeah.
in that particular item, but
Yeah.
we can keep that in mind. And maybe if the bank does close, maybe it will rise to the top in our unmet needs process next year as well.
Thank you.
Yes, we've got to develop this list every year, a fresh list, to make sure, you know, there's still needs that people are asking for. But some things do come back year after year.
I wanted to follow up. We did have a public comment on non-agenda items, and I'm curious if number 4 on the list under needs identified by the social services TAC, which identifies wheelchair accessible door-through-door service, assisted services for seniors and disabled adults Wednesdays in Ukiah, would that identified need address the issue that was brought up by the speaker?
It might. It seems to be focused on the
Well,
senior center type of
Maybe we go to public
transportation.
comment. We'll hear if
Yeah.
that may or may not address that need.
Right, right. So that is one that does come back every year.
Yes. And that item is specific to the senior center service, because door-through-door assisted service is something the senior center transportation services provide.
Okay.
Right.
Director Brown?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So it's my understanding that we're going to be taking the information that we have, and then it's going to go to the Transit Productivity Committee.
Correct.
As it did, and then at that time, there'll be a prioritization. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes,
We'll
there'd be
put
recommendations.
The recommendations for priority,
Yes.
and then those will be brought back.
Correct.
So
today.
we're taking the whole list of
Yes.
discussing individual items today. I mean, at the public hearing is really, really good, but we're gonna be hearing a lot more about this once we put this a little bit further down the road.
Right, and MTA will have an opportunity to do their analysis.
Right.
It'll go through TPC recommendation as well as the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council. So today, the only finding that has to be made is if any of the items in the list you believe qualify as an unmet transit need, then the whole list can be forwarded on to MTA, TPC, and the SS TAC to continue on in the process. And then later in the process, each item will be analyzed and there will be additional opportunity to make findings.
And actually, more information is provided at that
Yes,
time
yes,
on each
Yes.
individual item.
correct.
Because MTA can answer questions, is this a feasible service? Are the vehicles, what kind of cost is it? Where does it fall in the priorities? And, you know, they're in touch with more information about that sort of thing.
Okay. Director Alban-Smith?
I have a question. So anytime these involve more buses, more drivers, that sort of thing, I'm wondering if we could also consider infrastructure ability to handle that. In other words, I'd like to know if MTA has the ability to, you know, have that many more buses, that many more drivers, handle that, you know, are they capable of handling that kind of infrastructure? Or does it, we need to look at a new site for them? You know, it gets bigger. So I'd like to know their capacity. I don't really know the capacity.
Yes, and part of the catch with that is they've got to meet certain standards. They tend to be reluctant to start a whole new service because they don't want to have to, say if they couldn't continue to fund that service or it's not meeting ridership standards, things like that, they don't want to have to end a service that people have gotten used to. So they want to be pretty sure it's something that's going to be sustainable, has funding, you know, that they do have the capacity. So that's a very valid question.
Part of the reasonable to meet definition, because that's the next step after we determine whether or not things are unmet needs. In order for something to qualify as reasonable to meet, one of the criteria that must be met is the claimant that is expected to provide the service shall review, evaluate, and indicate that the service is operationally feasible and vehicles shall be currently available in the marketplace. So that operationally feasible sort of goes along with, you know,
Yes.
that part.
So reasonableness is an important part of that.
Big city stuff,
Yeah, so this, after it goes through a couple of transit committees, comes back to you as part of the budget, because if there are any needs that are found reasonable to meet, they should be funded in the budget. Oftentimes, we find other ways to meet needs besides with funding. It could be altering a route or maybe partnering with other kinds of agencies. So there are various ways to meet some of the needs, or with grant funding. Go out and get outside funding for it. So those are the typical ways we've been able to fund things lately. So this will come back to you. That reasonable to meet recommendation will come out of your committees. And generally, we'll have a very short list. It'll come down to the things that rise to the top that can be reasonable. And those will come back to you with the budget in June. So.
If we don't have any more questions from the board, I'd like to open it up for members of the public to comment during this public hearing. Yep. Okay, step forward.
There's no forms in the back.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's right.
My name is Randy Dalton, and I'm from Willits. I consider myself also a Laytonville and Casper. I'm a local person, grew up here, lived here for 45 years. I heard this, I took a bus from Willits to Fort Bragg and back again about a week ago. And the man who was driving said he drives that route 4 times a day. That is one heck of a drive. 32 miles of curvy roads. He was yawning by the time the fourth journey coming home. And I don't know what the schedule is or who to talk to, but I think that's a lot of work for one person. He was a 35-year-old gentleman, and he'd only been here since August. And I said, he's going to burn out. You know, I go over to my daughter's in Albion once a week and stay for a day or two. And that's a lot, but I'm an elder, so, but I know that road like the back of my hand. And I'm very much concerned, what I came for today. I think it's wonderful that we need our transit needs, but the scenic corridors. I came today to talk about the scenic corridor of our county. I fight for our skinny roads. I love them. I've never been to Disneyland, but I used to ride Branscombe Road, and I tell my kids, buckle up, you guys, for this is our roller coaster ride. And we go, and we might go 35 miles an hour. We just might go slow. But it's a beautiful, beautiful, people come here because of the beauty of our roads. And I came to cry. Because when I go to Fort Bragg now, and I see what Caltrans is doing, the widening and straightening and widening and straightening, and the destruction, the irreparable. Once it's gone, it's not coming back. We are watching the desert making of California. 95% of the old growth are gone. I look out, and every single time I come, it's getting all the 40 feet on either side of the highway that used to be there to protect and secure and save the roots from. We've got 70% slope. I'm a soil scientist. My husband graduated from Berkeley in conservation of natural resources. The reason why we have our coastal zone, mountain zone, is because of the subduction of the geological, the continental shelf that collapsed, and it's going underneath and it's pushing up. This is a moving mass of mountains. It's not like the valleys. It's moving all the time. Highway 101 between Ukiah and Willits is living proof of that. You know, I remember the 2-lane roads that lasted for 10,000 years for the walking Indian people, you know. We're acting like, you know, we own the place and like it's, you know, it's ours and the automobile is supreme. I'm here as a Native American who is a white woman whose immigrants came from Europe. But I've lived here since the Mayflower. And I'm Pomo. My family's Pomo. And I feel like the destruction, you've got to take into account. There are limits to growth. We have plants here that you won't find anywhere else. Anywhere. The rattlesnake grass, the chicory, the lupin, the clover, the wild strawberries, the yerba buena. When I see what's going on right now in the Chamberlain Creek area, there are medicine plants there. These people that are coming in, I heard you're the Caltrans man that I'm going to have to talk to and educate. I'm an educator.
Please direct your comments to the board.
Okay, well, I'm educating. I mean, I think we need to acknowledge the native indigenous wisdom and history that is God-given. We didn't plant these trees. We didn't grow the wildflowers. And a lot of these, I think bay laurel, California bay laurel, there's a medicine tree that's this big around, probably 300 years old. It's,
I think, Randy,
these things need to be protected. The riparian watersheds of the creeks and the streams, that when they're adjacent to a salmon-bearing creek, they're supposed to be 150 feet, 75, 150 feet on either side of those creeks are not to be touched because of the canopy. The waters become evaporated, the salmon die. They are on the threatened and endangered species list. I want to know where's Fish and Game.
Okay. So Randy,
I came to growl, and I'm going to growl, and I can sit down and be quiet. I'm quiet
no,
at home
I just
all
want
the
to let you
time.
know, Randy, because you came in a little bit.
The transit, I also am concerned about the safety of the transit people that are working too hard. They have to work, recognize the steepness of the slopes and the curbing of the roads so that maybe they work 20 hours a week. I don't care how much money they make, but somebody's got to recognize the reality of Mendocino, because we are in a very beautiful area, and I'd love to see it be here for my children and my grandchildren, and for me too. I'm getting older, and it's harder. And
Randy, I just want to let you know, because
I know,
I guess
I'm
you took
over
the bus.
3 minutes.
But I also just want to let you know, because it came in a little bit late, that later in the meeting, under board members' reports, you'll hear a report from Caltrans, but it's later in the meeting.
Okay, well, I'm concerned about the beauty of our scenic corridors. I like our skinny roads. I do not want to see the destruction of our native plants. Casper's, where I grew up, and the plants that we have, that need to be protected. And I don't know how we get my voice in to more than 3 minutes, once every 6 months or whatever. I'd like to be daughters of California, native daughters. I'm a native daughter born in Oakland, and I'm a California Okie. And I'm going to be here forever. As far as I'm concerned, I'm teaching my girls and my children, my 12 grandkids and my 6 kids. You guys stand up for what we need for the quality of our living.
Okay. Thank you, Randy.
It's going to look like that behind you. See the one tree standing? That's what it's going to look like.
Do we have any other public comment during the public hearing?
Thank you, Chairman Jurdy, directors. I'd like to speak on the Wednesday issue because of the comments made by the woman earlier. She's absolutely right. There is a shortage of bus rides on Wednesdays, and historically it goes back to 2008 when the Senior Center lost funding from the state of California that helped us to operate our transportation program at that time. And because of the cutbacks that we had to make at that time, we eliminated our Wednesday bus service. So our buses only run on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday now, which coexist with our lunch bunch program for seniors with dementia. Now, that's why it's been on here, number 4, wheelchair accessible door-through-door for seniors and disabled adults on Wednesdays in the Ukiah area. So one of the things that we've been wanting to do is to get that restored. And that ties in to the other thing on the recommendations, consideration of additional allocations for local transportation funds to maintain service levels of senior centers' existing plans. So we ask for increased funding because to maintain the level of service and expand the level of service, we do need more of the pie of the TDA funds. And that gets back to the triennial performance audit that was done of MTA that just got completed for the period fiscal years 2016 through 2018 and the one before that, because both of those triennial audits recommended that the TDA formula, where monies are shared between the senior centers and MTA for this type of service for seniors and disabled, get reallocated or revisited, because that formula in terms of how that pie is divided up between the senior centers and MTA hasn't been visited in years. Actually, I think 1997 was the last time it was visited. And so right now, the pot of money, the TDA pot of money, gets divided up so that the senior centers get 15% of it and MTA gets the rest of it. If we got a larger share of that, then we could restore the rides. And that would probably add an additional up to 100 rides in the Ukiah area for seniors and disabled adults if the senior center could restore bus service on Wednesdays. And the other important thing to remember is that because we share these funds, it doesn't mean that Dial-A-Ride and what the senior center provides is equivalent. We provide a higher level of service. We provide door-through-door service so that seniors that need to be taken into their home because they're so mobility impaired that that's the only safe way they can get back to their residence, our drivers get out of the bus and take them back into their home so they're safe. Our drivers who carry the seniors or disabled adults that have memory impairments, we make sure that there's someone home so that we drop those clients off, there's a family member there to receive them. We just don't take somebody who's memory impaired and leave them at the curb or leave them on their doorstep. We make sure that they're safe. And that's the difference between the door-through-door service and the Dial-A-Ride service. And so to the extent that we could restore that on Wednesdays, that would be huge for our community. One last thing, in 2012, MTA did a short-range plan in terms of recommendations that they thought were important to implement at that time. And when they looked at the relationship between the senior center programs and MTA, one of those recommendations was that more funding should be given to the senior center programs, and those programs should be expanded because they do what they do the best, and that MTA should be there to pick up the slack, provide Dial-A-Ride service for after hours when the senior centers don't operate, provide Dial-A-Ride service for weekends when senior centers don't operate, but let the bulk of that be handled by the senior centers. That was discussed and was one of the recommendations in 2012, and we really think that that would be the most effective way to help revisit this situation right now in terms of who does what and what's best for the community. Thank you very much.
Do we have any other public comment on this public hearing? Okay. Maybe just take back to the board. Are there any other board comments for the public hearing?
I would move the recommended action that this be
Second that.
pushed forward.
Okay.
Have we closed the public
So
hearing?
we'll, okay.
Did you close the public hearing?
Considering that, we'll close the public hearing at 2:20.
I will make that recommended motion, number 3.
Second that.
Any other comments?
That can be a voice vote.
Okay. Do you need a roll call because it's a public hearing, or just?
I don't think so. Usually resolutions and financial issues.
So, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So are we on to committee appointments?
Committee appointments.
And let me just, before we start committee appointments, suggest that we may need to take the closed session item out of order on the agenda, because I believe we have the conference room for a limited amount of time, starting at 2:30.
Well, yeah.
Not yet, but just something to keep in mind as we continue forward in the agenda.
Okay, all right. Do you have an estimated length of time for the closed session? Is it 20 minutes, 10 minutes?
I think 20 minutes would probably be sufficient.
Okay, so as long as we go to closed session then by 3 o'clock, because we have the room until 3:30?
Okay.
Okay. So on committee assignments, we know who was on these committees last year. Maybe we can streamline it. Does anybody want to change their committee assignments? Is everyone willing to serve on their same committees, or is there any interest in?
I'm happy.
So if we're content with the committee assignments, could we just have a single motion to?
We could do that, just for the whole slate.
Yeah, let's do that.
I don't want to take all the fun if you guys want to be on Calpine.
I think it's good for continuity to have people serve
I'm
for
just
more than a
starting to
year.
figure it all out.
Yes.
A while.
Yeah, exactly, so.
Could we have a motion to
Yeah.
ratify the?
I move that we ratify this slate.
I second.
Okay.
All right.
Any public comment?
It's in the packet who these members are.
Yeah. So executive committee, the chair, the vice chair, and Director Wasserman, and transit productivity committee members Brown and Carter, CalCog Director Alban Smith, Director Hashak alternate, and that's the motion. Okay. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you so much for serving. It really helps us. Okay.
Number 8 is the meeting calendar for the year. Is there a need or a desire to change the calendar that's proposed?
This is, has the changes that we talked about in December. So we altered this slightly. We moved a tour out to May for Ukiah Valley area. And that's the only tour we have down here.
I believe we left the option
Didn't we have
open in
That's it, a
fall. if
placeholder.
we-
I was looking for it, but it
Yeah.
doesn't say very much, so.
Yeah, so we left it as an option, if it seems like there's
Yeah.
a good place to visit at that point in time.
Yeah, it's basically a placeholder for October.
So looking at the calendar, we saw a draft back in December. There's no particular conflicts with people. We could just approve the proposed calendar. Does someone want to make a motion?
I move we accept the calendar that has been proposed.
Second.
Okay, any public comment on the proposed calendar for this year? Seeing any? Okay, all
Okay.
those in favor?
Aye.
We'll get that posted.
Consent calendar.
Okay, next is the consent calendar, which is the approval of the December minutes, the technical advisory committee recommendation for the amended transportation overall work program, the approval of the Mendocino Transit Authority's grant application, and support for grant applications for intercity bus, and the appointments to the social services committee. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar, or does someone want to change it in any way?
Move to approve. I will second.
Okay. Any public comment on the consent calendar?
And that does need to be a roll call vote.
Okay.
Director Brown?
Yes.
Director Stransky?
Yes.
Director Wasserman?
Yes.
Director Albin Smith?
Yes.
Director Haschak?
Yes.
Director Jackman?
Yes.
Vice Chair Carter?
Yes.
And Chair Drudy?
Yes. Okay, all right. So we're going to recess as the Policy Advisory Committee and reconvene as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency. Do we have a motion to ratify the actions that we just took?
I will so move.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Public comment? Just because Caltrans doesn't vote on this part of the agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So now we're going to go to reports, and because I know we're going to have a closed session, I don't know for sure we're going to get through all the reports. Maybe we could go directly to MCOG director's reports, and then we'll work our way back down from A to
Okay.
G. Do we have any director's reports? I think Rex, you may have a few comments that Caltrans was relaying to you about the project on Highway 20.
Sure. So Dan, as you mentioned, you had contacted me before this meeting and let me know that you had received some concerns from members of the public regarding the project that involved tree cutting on Highway 20, which is called the Camp 20 Safety Project, that a couple of the speakers here today mentioned and expressed concerns. And so I was able to speak with Frank Demling, the project manager, and he provided me with a pretty thorough amount of information regarding the project. I think, without reading sort of all of the talking points or getting into a lot of the details about the project, I'll try to summarize a few things. First, I would like to commend the speakers. Clearly, it's a very emotional and serious topic that they take very seriously and are trying to affect change and to do good for the natural landscape. So we recognize that, and we encourage people to participate in the public engagement process. In this particular case, the project was advertised during the draft environmental document phase. It went through a full public process by the California Environmental Quality Act. There was a draft environmental mitigated negative declaration environmental document that was prepared, and it was advertised in both of the local newspapers, a paid advertisement more than just a public notice. There was an actual paid quarter-page advertisement that went out in both the Willits and the Fort Bragg newspapers. And, and...
What year? When was that done?
Hang on a second. So the public input period was from May 7th, 2018 until June 11th, 2018. And the advertisements were placed in the May 10th, 2018 edition of the Willits Weekly and the Fort Bragg Advocate, both of those newspapers. I actually have copies of, a reduced format copies of both of those advertisements that went out. So you can see that they...
That was 2 years ago.
Correct, yeah.
It's never been posted on the road.
How are we supposed to fight when that's not even a fair
Well, so
fight.
let's keep
Well,
going.
yeah.
We need to know.
So it was advertised, and we do encourage, and it was also posted publicly, and it was available, and I could read the chronology of the entire process if you'd like to hear that.
So Rex, maybe I could just ask a question. So for a learning experience for me or for anybody else, is there one place or a couple places where people can go to just sort of see this project's, the trees are already cut, but for all I know, there could be some other project down the road that's in the planning stage. And so how would someone know to look where those projects are being planned?
So there's, the first answer would be the Caltrans website. We have a front page that has projects that are of interest to the public, but through that webpage also there's a portal where you can get information about projects that are in all stages of development from pre-initiation all the way through to construction. All of that information is publicly posted, and now there is a fairly user-friendly, or more user-friendly than it has been in the past.
So would a
means of
starting
doing
place
that.
for that be on the Caltrans District 1 website?
Yeah,
And
that would be for for District 1 projects, yes.
okay.
And another place to get information is by attending these board meetings and also the technical advisory committee meetings for MCOG. That's where a lot of decision-making takes place. And yeah, I would say you can also, there are, interested party type lists that you can sign up for to receive project information about projects as they're being developed. Contacting, in each of the projects, there's a public information officer and there's a project manager, and either of those folks would be happy to give more detailed information. Getting back to this particular project, I just thought it would be good to explain a little bit. One of the speakers mentioned 2.5 collisions. Actually, what the statistic was that I'm sure she heard was that the rate of fatal plus injury collisions in this section of highway is 2.5 times the statewide average of similar facilities for fatal plus injury. However, the rate of collisions for fatal collisions in similar facilities, compared with similar facilities, is 13.9 times the statewide average for similar facilities. So.
Over what period of time, could I ask you?
Well, I'm not positive about what the rate is derived from, which period of time, but it's projected that it will reduce 24 collisions in a 20-year period off into the future. So I can't say for certain that rate is based on a 20 years back into the past, but it's the important thing is that it's a comparison to similar facilities that have a similar geometry, similar volumes, traffic volumes, and similar speeds that are taking place. So when we see something like that, we have to act and we have to try to address it. And part of the reason that the project is as big as it is because this particular project involves both a vertical and a horizontal curve correction. So they're basically realigning a section of the highway, and that required cutting quite a few trees, 115 trees, because the highway is going to be widened and realigned, and it's going to include the addition of shoulders as well as all of the drainage that's associated with realigning the highway, including at least one new culvert. So it is a project that is very visible, and it does involve cutting trees. I would point out that it takes place within the Jackson Demonstration State Forest, which is a working forest that's owned by the state of California. CAL FIRE manages and owns that forest, and the purpose of the forest is it's designated as a multi-use forest that includes harvesting timber as well as managing the forest for a variety of different uses. And all of the wood that comes for all of the lumber that comes from the trees that were cut is going to go back to CAL FIRE for them to use in projects that they're building. I was hesitant to jump into just reading off all of these information points, but I have more information. If there's any particular questions that I can try to answer, I would be happy to try to answer them.
Anybody?
I'd like to know who got the lumber, who got the logs.
Jackson State Forest.
Yeah, CAL FIRE.
But,
CAL FIRE.
CAL FIRE doesn't cut the logs. Who did it go to?
Oh, they have a small sawmill.
Campsite.
The way it works.
Yeah, the trees, the lumber that came from the trees that were harvested is going to go to CAL FIRE.
There's a mill at Parlin Fork, and
Did you see the size of the logs? The stumps are huge. Yes. They don't have a facility to do that.
Oh, I don't know exactly where it's going to be milled.
I'm just saying that that's not true.
how, well, actually, they have an old mill that was brought in from, okay. So it's not like a regular mill that you would see at Georgia. I used to be the assistant manager at Jackson State Forest, so I'm pretty familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens is the logs are brought in and
All about the procedure of it. I'm just saying that the stumps are big enough that I doubt whether there's any stumps in any sawmills in Mendocino County that can handle them.
not
unless they
commercial
split 'em
mills.
in
You're
half.
right. Commercial mills would not.
Okay,
These are different.
okay.
Richie?
I have two questions, Rex. Number one, is there additional passing lanes created by this project? And the second question, I'll just go with my second one also, is because this is a scenic corridor, was a consideration made by Caltrans based on that, in that higher speeds will necessarily limit one's ability to enjoy the scenery as they go by?
So your first question regarding passing lanes, the project doesn't, as far as I know, does not include any passing lanes. It's just a realignment of the highway with the addition of shoulders and rumble strips for safety purposes. As far as whether there was an analysis of how traffic speeds might impact aesthetics, is that basically what you're asking?
Yes.
Again, I don't know for certain exactly what what all the methodology was that was employed in the environmental assessment. I do actually have copies. I have a limited number of copies of the environmental document, which might deal with that, although my suspicion is that traffic speeds probably would not be part of the aesthetic impact evaluation. I could be wrong, but that would be my guess.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question. So in a couple cases, residents have asked me, and then I've asked County Department of Transportation about putting in guardrails where there have been accidents. And in the cases where I asked, they felt it didn't warrant that, but they instead installed reflectors that are, they're not a barrier. I mean, a car could run over it, but it's just it's a deterrent from going off the road. And I know the rumble strip accomplishes sort of the same thing. But in this case, where you've had these accidents, and I know you're realigning the road a little bit to diminish the likelihood of going off the road, but does this project also include either reflectors or guardrails?
I didn't see reflectors or guardrails in the description of the project. I do know that when they approach a safety analysis, they usually look at it in an incremental way, and they also look at things such as the types of collisions that are taking place and whether they're taking place at night. If there's, if they're nighttime collisions, they might employ reflectors before they would employ guardrail, for example. It depends on the geometrics and the type of collisions that are taking place, again, where they're running off the road, at what part of the curve they're running off the road, and whether a guardrail would be something that they think would help to prevent or to lessen the severity of those kinds of collisions.
Okay.
So I've got a comment. Well, I have two comments. So as far as the notification that came out, it's not unusual that public notification of this would come out a couple of years before something actually happens. That's because that's the opportunity for comment and addressing any concerns and any potential changes to be made. Anything that comes out of that then can be incorporated in final design and the right-of-way process, which all has to happen before construction, which is what's happening now, can actually begin. So that's not unusual. I also wanted to comment that Caltrans is making a real effort to involve MCOG earlier in the project identification process and project development process. So hopefully we and you all will know about projects that are coming up ahead of time in the future. So it's a welcome change. We appreciate that.
I have one further question.
Go ahead.
And I'm not in favor of cutting trees. By any means. Has did anybody sue Caltrans as a result of one of these accidents which might have prompted going forward with this project? Because to me, that's probably what might have happened. They might have got sued. Caltrans has information that such a large percentage of more accidents occur on this right of way, and they did nothing about it. So now Caltrans' hands are tied. They don't do something about it. They take a chance of getting sued, So I mean, I'm not saying I favor cutting trees, but in a situation like this, they may not have had a choice. It was brought to their attention that this is a dangerous area, and they needed to do something about it. And
I'm not aware of whether there were any particular lawsuits about this particular segment of highway, but I do know that the way that the traffic safety, highway safety improvement program works is when there is a concentration of collisions that's higher than the average for a similar facility, that's when the attention of the investigators is drawn and when projects are generally initiated. And so in this particular case, with a collision concentration as high as almost 14 times, we, to use your language, we were obligated to act on it.
I'll just make a small comment. The last time that we got into a big tree cutting thing on the highway in the 90s, I don't know if you were around then, but there was a grant that guaranteed that Caltrans could have money to repair the roads if they moved all the obstructions within 15 feet or 25 feet of the roadway. And so they were taking out these giant redwoods, and people chained themselves to the trees. It was very nasty. So some of those trees are still there. I hope they stay. But that was a condition of the grant. So that was the last big push. This one is a little different. It's very visible.
I wasn't around back then, but I do know that oftentimes there are things that can be employed, like using guardrail to deflect vehicles from a fixed object like a tree. Presumably they did look at a range of alternatives for this project, but what they ended up doing was the preferred alternative.
Okay, well, Thank you, and I do look forward to learning more about how we'll work with Caltrans to, track these projects, particularly when they're in the planning stage, because that's when any input we might have might be most effective for Caltrans.
Yeah, and I would add also that a project that is initiated because of safety concerns, those projects are generally fast-tracked as much as, the commenters mentioned, being surprised that it was 2 years from the time that the environmental document was made available until the trees were cut. That's actually a condensed timeline for a project for a large project, so.
Okay.
Dan,
All right.
I have one more comment. So a long time ago, I was asked if Fort Bragg would ever become Carmel by the Sea or Monterey, and the comment was made, not as long as these roads stay curvy and small. I don't think we want to be a Monterey. I don't know if I'm speaking for the rest of Fort Bragg and the coast, but we don't want to be a 4-lane highway straightened out, on the way from 101. So if you want to take that back to the group, I think you're going to have quite a fight if it gets too much bigger.
Comment noted, for sure. And my department, among the things that we work on is the long-term planning concepts for the different routes in the district. And I can tell you that there are no long-range plans to expand the capacity of either Highway 1 or Highway 20. All of the projects that you're going to see are going to be safety related, basically. So there's no plans to expand those facilities into anything more than a 2-lane highway.
Okay, well, thank you. We do have a closed session, and we pretty much need the time we have now to use the room that we have available to us.
I have a
Time
question.
flies.
What about Fish and Game? Where's Fish and Game in the protection of the salmon?
But that would be part of the environmental impact report, probably.
Correct.
Was that addressed?
Yeah.
Fish and Game was among the agencies that were collaborated with.
Because I know on Highway 101, the culvert has pointy rocks where the salmon are supposed to come in. They get their bellies all cut open. There's a 15-foot culvert under Highway 101.
Okay, so at 2:49, we're gonna go into closed session, and we have a room in the back here for the closed session.
So, should I stick around? You guys?
Have you been down Highway 20 and see this? No, I haven't seen it.
Really, they put you this.
Oh, yeah, right.
I talked to Frank Inman. He said, point well taken, when I told him about 2008.
going to reconvene at, is our audio back on? Okay, we're going to reconvene at 3:17. Yeah, it's back on. At 3:17, and we're just going to report out. We just came out of closed session conference with legal counsel regarding Dewey White versus Mendocino Council of Governments, and direction was given to legal counsel. Back to reports. We're going to go on to Mendocino Transit Authority. I don't know if we really have anything to report. There's no one from staff from MTA at this point in the meeting. The next thing is North Coast Rail Authority. I don't know if they've had a meeting recently or not.
Yeah, we had a meeting in Eureka last month, and there was a lot of good presentations on the bike trails, hiking, biking trails up there all around the Humboldt Bay, all the way up to Blue Lakes. And there's still issues with the Judicial Council of California paying for some of the debts that pertaining to the Ukiah courthouse. And so we're trying to figure that out.
Okay. Then we have in our packet, MCOG staff summary of meetings. Is there any meetings you want to highlight? Okay, then we have MCOG administrative staff, State Route 20, improvements at Blosser Lane near or in Willits.
The picture that I got from MCOG was certainly different than the one that I got when I went to the meeting. And I was just surprised, because the fellow that was there from Caltrans stated that this striping with all the colors and stuff was easy to do and was not very expensive. And then I come up with this was just unreal.
Yes, so the meeting that Director Stransky is referring to was several months ago, organized by Caltrans, actually at the elementary school, and there was a good representation of the community, Caltrans, MCOG, the school district. Present at this meeting. We walked the area, so for those of you, I think you're probably all familiar with the intersection because we did the board tour there, but it's Highway 20 and Blosser Lane, just on the western edge of Willits. Blosser Lane leads to an elementary school, and then a little further to the south is a middle school. Then to the north of Highway 20 is a residential area. The intersection is very wide, and it is, pedestrians don't feel safe crossing. The school actually has a policy discouraging kids from walking or riding bikes. There's also some industry in the area that results in a lot of truck traffic. So at this meeting, Caltrans presented a couple different options for improvements at the intersection. One of them was a roundabout. The other is what was called a protected intersection with extended curbs and enhanced crosswalks. In addition to either of those improvements, they also talked about traffic calming features in advance of the intersection in either direction. So just recently, and this is something that'll be funded with State Highway Operation and Protection Program. That's not right, yes.
I think that's right.
Protection Program funding. And actually is planned for this coming construction season with the anticipation that it would be complete prior to the school year starting. So what ultimately they are planning to do in this, in the immediate future is in the attachment to the staff report. So as Director Stransky mentioned, it is not everything that had been identified in the protected intersection design. The extended sidewalks, extended curbs are not incorporated. There is an enhanced crosswalk, and beacons that would flash, pedestrian activated beacons that would flash at the intersection, as well as about 400 feet in advance of the intersection in both directions, and a speed feedback sign. One of the big issues there is that traffic coming, eastbound traffic coming into the area can't really see the intersection until they are already very close to the intersection, and because you're finally in a straight stretch of road after being in windy mountainous road for many miles, people tend to drive very fast. So the hopes are that this would reduce speed and alert drivers before they are at the intersection. Rather than extended actual physical sidewalks, the excess shoulder would be striped to visually narrow the intersection. So this, and there will be additional lighting, so the intersection will be better lit in general, in addition to just the flashing beacons. This is not everything that the community had talked about at the meeting. However, those additional improvements will be included, along with still considering the roundabout as an alternative in a longer range project. Unfortunately, due to the time and budget constraints that they had some funding available to use right away to make an improvement, they weren't able to incorporate those sidewalks. So those are not off the table. I believe that we will see additional improvements at this intersection, but this summer, those extended sidewalks won't be included, but we will see some improvement at that intersection.
Will they do the colors?
I don't actually, so the shoulder, the striped shoulder will be, I believe, white stripes. The crosswalk will be a high visibility crosswalk. I don't know, is that white? Do you know what they use for the crosswalk?
I think they would have the option of using yellow if it's in a school zone, which
Okay.
sounds like is the case, but I'm not sure if that's a mandatory thing or if that's a discretionary thing.
Okay. So I think that would probably be the only color that we would see at this point.
Well, that was the nice thing about this, was the colors that would signify for people that this was a different kind of an intersection. And this was told to us, and Nathalie was there, I don't know who else was there, and from Caltrans. And the thing that I got, and the thing I took back to my council, was that the fellow said that it was in their budget to be able to do the colors and the things, and now that it's not. And so consequently, this is just really a dangerous place. And when you come out of Highway 20 of zigzagging around for 40 miles, and then they put their foot in it, and when we were standing there, a logging truck went by, and he had to be going 65 miles an hour through there. And and you talk about the death count, that's gonna be one spot that's really it's gonna flash, because the kids don't understand, when they're late to school, they're not gonna walk all the way down to Highway 101 and crawl across and then come out. They're gonna go across that. And if there's somebody coming, and there's a hill, and so you can't see a kid running across this street, you can't see it at 65 miles an hour until you're on him. End of my spiel, but this is shabby. I want you to tell Caltrans that I said this was shabby.
So,
I will bring that back.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I have one question. On the beacons at the intersection, are those two-sided?
they are at the intersection.
At the intersection, they have two of them.
What's it saying?
Or is it one for each direction, so that you've got the beacons approaching at 400 feet,
Right.
But then you have other beacons at the intersection.
Right. Yeah, I see what you mean, and I don't know the answer to that. I believe the lights themselves are visible from both sides, but I don't know if the sign itself is two-sided, so I can look into
Yeah,
that.
I'm more concerned that the lights are visible, because if people see the lights, they're gonna know
Right.
I
something's there.
suspect that,
Okay.
that the details haven't been necessarily
Right. You don't know
determined.
the standard
Whether,
for those
whether,
signs?
no, I don't
Okay.
know whether, I would think that it probably faces in, that there's probably, if it's not two-sided, that there are two sets, so that
Back to
they're
back.
visible from both directions.
All right, we can follow up on that, and then we'll definitely express the concerns about the project.
Yeah, and specifically about the colorized asphalt, I'll try to find out what the story is with that.
Yeah, and I don't have that original drawing with me now, but I don't remember if some of that was, I think there were, maybe they had the green,
Yeah, they have green
bike
and purple
lanes. And then there were some things that I think were just, colored on the map to differentiate between the different improvements.
This is what it looked like.
Okay,
That's what was presented to us. Not the roundabout,
right,
but this.
yes,
And that's noticeable. It's just got more to it than what these help.
yes, I agree.
I mean, as you come over the hill, you're not even gonna see these until you get onto it. Plus, it's a curve and downhill. And so, anyhow, thank you.
Dan?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I totally agree with Commissioner Stransky about this, is that I taught at Blosser Lane for many years. It's about a half mile from the road, from that intersection. But there's no way that I would let a kid, my kids, walk across that intersection the way it is, or, with anything less than totally dampening the traffic, because it's just it's a spot. That I don't see how you do it just with these lights, how people are. Like Mr. Stransky said, there's a hill and these cars are trucks coming right over into that intersection, so.
And I will say that one additional concern that I heard from Caltrans about the extended sidewalks is that when they went back and looked at the design, there was concern that trucks coming out of Blosser Lane, I believe, and making a right turn, if there was an extended sidewalk, they wouldn't be able to maneuver that turn. So that was an additional issue with the design that was presented at that meeting. So there was some discussion of a mountable sidewalk, so it's just a very low sidewalk, sometimes like the truck aprons you would see on the outside of a roundabout. They're very low, trucks can still go over them. That was suggested. However, there were concerns that would then give pedestrians a sense of safety when their trucks were still able to cross over that, maybe a false sense of safety. So we're still working on this, but this is planned for this summer.
What seems to be part of the issue is as you're driving east from the coast, there's no real obvious spot where people can pull over and let the faster vehicles come pass you up. And so people generally are bunched up with 2 or 3 vehicles, with some vehicles who want to drive faster behind you. And so I just think that's part of it. So there's no particular reason to feel like you need to slow down until you get past Blosser Lane, because visually there's nothing really telling you slow down. You're kind of entering the outskirts of Willits. I think most people aren't even aware of there being a school off Blosser Lane,
Right.
and who live on the coast or
There's no way to even tell because there's no sign that says it's school.
or tourists who are just traveling through once or twice a year. I think wouldn't know that there's a school anywhere nearby. So I think those are part of the issues, and I don't know if signage telling that there's a school nearby is really going to cause people to drive slower. I think just the dynamics of the road doesn't really clue you in that you need to slow down. Okay. Well, thanks for the report. Anything else?
Well, if there is a school, then it has to be 25 miles an hour when kids are present, right?
Right, I don't know, so to be a school zone, it has to be a certain distance, and I think that intersection might be just outside of the distance for a school zone. I don't know for sure. They are also in the proposed design, they're posting an advisory speed of 35 miles per hour, which is lower than the current posted speed. So there are hopes that that will help slow traffic as well.
Well, I think one of the problems that you have there is the current electronic sign is actually east of the intersection. So you don't even see that electronic sign until you're at the intersection. The new one is going to be significantly further down the road.
Yes.
So people will see that sign, and then if we have the flashing lights there, hopefully they'll know that there's something special about that intersection, because most intersections don't have big flashing lights
Right.
warning you when you're approaching them.
Right, the new speed sign would be 600 feet
Yeah.
west of the intersection, and then the pedestrian beacons 300 feet west of the intersection and east of the intersection.
And then those, I don't know if folks have seen those rectangular rapid flashing beacons, but those are quite a bit different from the typical alternating round ones that can sometimes, if you're used to seeing them, they can blend in. The flashing beacons are a little bit more difficult to ignore. They're pretty noticeable. And they're activated by the pedestrians, so they're not going off all the time.
Okay, all right. Are we ready to go to the federal transportation grant awards?
Yes, so Diana already shared the news about her grant for the Ukiah Senior Center, but I wanted to share that all of our local applicants under the FTA Section 5310 grant program were successful. So that's a grant program that provides funding for transportation programs, and you can get both operational and vehicle grants for services for the elderly and disabled. So the Ukiah Senior Center received their grant for a new van. Coastal Seniors, which is in Point Arena, received an operating grant, and Consolidated Tribal Health also received an operating grant under that program. And so those were all of the applicants that we had locally for the program. They were all successful. So that was great news. That is a California Transportation Commission staff recommendation at this point. It won't be finalized until the CTC takes action at their March meeting, but at this point, I think it is very likely that those would be approved. So, just some good news to share.
Okay. Are there any miscellaneous reports?
I don't have any miscellaneous. Do you have anything?
Okay, so MCOG planning staff, we have the fiscal year 2021 draft overall work plan.
Good afternoon. This is just for information only. Obviously, it's under reports. This is the fiscal year 2021 draft transportation planning overall work program. Under the consent calendar, you guys approved the third amendment for the planning work program for this current year. It's now time to begin the process to develop the draft for the upcoming year. We have received 2 applications for this draft cycle, one being from the County Department of Transportation for their combined special studies for $60,000, and one for the City of Ukiah sidewalk maintenance and ADA curb ramp inventory for $50,000. We do expect to include the routine MCOG planning staff work elements as we have done in the past. We won't know based on basically just estimates at this point, but moving forward, we will be submitting the draft document due to Caltrans March 1st. This has been reviewed, initial discussions with the Technical Advisory Committee at the January 15th TAC meeting, and they will be reviewing the draft document at their February meeting prior to being submitted to Caltrans for discussion, and they will provide comments back to us in the spring. Once we receive the comments back from Caltrans, we will continue to move forward with implementing their comments and bringing the draft and final work program back to you. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, not seeing any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And then we have public workshops regarding the vehicle miles traveled regional baseline study.
Yes, thank you. As I've previously reported, we're working with Fair and Peers on this project. It's a Senate Bill 743 Vehicle Miles Traveled Regional Baseline Study, and the project is well underway, and we are at the point where we're going to be holding the public and stakeholder outreach meetings. We want you to be aware of it because this project affects all of your cities and the counties, and if possible, we would love for you to join us in one of the workshops in Ukiah on February 18th at the Farm Advisors Conference Room at 5:30 to 6:30, and then in Fort Bragg on February 19th, 5:30 to 6:30 at Fort Bragg Town Hall. So you may recall that this is the legislation that changes the measurement of how transportation impacts under CEQA are analyzed from level of service to vehicle miles traveled. So it's an important project in the work program, and we just want you to be aware of those public outreach workshops. And this project is on track to be completed this fiscal year, and we anticipate a presentation of the final report to MCOG in June. But we would love it if you could join us at one of these public workshops. The consultant's going to be giving an overview of what the legislation is about. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Then we just have the fire vulnerability assessment plan.
Yeah, just a quick update on that. So this is a project funded through a climate change adaptation grant that we received from Caltrans. We have a consultant that is working on this project to assess fire vulnerability and come up with an evacuation plan. It is a county-wide project. The consultant started with a stakeholder and public survey and got a very good response. I think nearly 300 responses to that survey, which asked people about various concerns they had. It gauged public awareness of evacuation and information, like the information systems like Nixle or Mendo Alert. And asked about specific concerns they had in terms of evacuation. So there are a variety of concerns identified. Of course, limited ingress and egress, accumulation of fuels, and a lack of dedicated funding for wildlife prevention and response efforts. So that survey information will be used to sort of guide public outreach and will be incorporated into the plan. The consultants anticipate having draft evacuation plans ready before the upcoming fire season. So the overall plan will not be completed by that point, but they want to have the evacuation plans available for the fire chiefs before fire season. They'll also be, once there are draft plans, they'll be holding community forums to educate members of the public about evacuation, as well as awareness about some of those information systems that are available. So the community outreach forums are anticipated for late spring or early summer of this year. Ultimately, these plans will be, or the plan, I believe, will be adopted by, it would be up to the Board of Supervisors to adopt this countywide plan. but it would be accepted by the MCOG board once it's complete. So that is my update on that. Director Carter is on our technical advisory group, which met last week. Do you have anything to add?
The contractor is actually working very closely with all of the fire chiefs.
Yes.
And has met with all of the fire chiefs to discuss problems in every single area. And the lead person on the consultant firm is a retired battalion chief from CAL FIRE. So he knows the system and he knows what he needs to do, and like Nafili said, he hopes to have an actual evacuation plan available in May. So it'll be here before the next fire season.
Who is the chief?
His name is
Yeah, Bob Newman, Category
Newman.
5 Consultants is the
Bob
name of
Newman?
the firm. Bob Newman is his name, yes. But yeah, he's been working with all the chiefs. We also had Red Cross at our last technical advisory group meeting. We've got the Fire Safe Council. It's a very large group.
Yeah.
The county schools. We're hoping to engage the Mendocino Transit Authority. So it's a large group.
Can I ask, so how will this be coordinated with the individual communities? I mean, the evacuation plans and all that, is that gonna go through our city managers?
At this point, I don't know. I'm not privy to that information. I imagine that they will coordinate with all of the local fire chiefs, and then the fire chiefs will make arrangements with the local authority or the local communities to do the presentations.
Great.
Because they're working with, the chief from Laytonville Fire is on it.
Great,
And
yeah.
Laytonville's not a city, so she'll coordinate with the Laytonville Area Municipal Advisory Committee to have a meeting.
That's great. So with these winds and all that and the scare, so our fire season could start in May and it could start in October. We never know when the fire season, so as soon as possible.
Our fire season could start tomorrow with the amount of rain
This is
that
true.
we had.
This is true.
Okay,
So
thank you.
Any more questions on that?
Any miscellaneous planning reports? Okay, all right, we're on to the rest of the director reports. Any director reports?
Yeah, I have one. I don't know if this fits into MCOG or not, but if anybody on this staff or anybody in the room has ever been to the Sonoma County Airport or city airport to pick up a commuter that comes back to Ukiah, Willits, wherever it goes, or goes from that place down to San Francisco or Oakland to catch an airplane, you better have your Alaskan winter on when you're standing there, because they moved that hut from in front of the airport down to the side where the parking lot is now, and there's about an 18-inch where air goes underneath it. And I'm telling you, if you stood there for 30 minutes in the winter, you couldn't walk. It's just absolutely atrocious. And I have been there at 1 o'clock in the morning to pick up my wife, and I wouldn't let her stand there for 5 minutes because she would be frozen solid by the time I got there. I mean, it's terrible what they did to it. And so I don't know how many of you people use that as a transfer, but that is really something that needs to be taken care of by MTA, I think.
So it's a pickup location that the airport, is it the Airport Express, I think is the name?
Right.
The pickup location for that service?
They've moved it from in front of the airport down to probably 50 or 60 yards down the road to, and they put in a new parking lot that shows how many times I go there, but they put in a new parking lot. But I mean, the wind blows through there, you can't believe. And with nothing to block the wind, just blows on you. And it's terrible. And I don't know if this is a place to put it, but we fund MTA, and they're the ones that, where you stop to get picked up at that particular spot.
So, Director Skransky, are you saying maybe there should be like a shelter of some kind at that bus stop?
I would say that there should be something, because you can't survive it.
Okay.
I don't care what kind of clothes you have on. It's just, and the wind blows through there. It changes just in that 60 yards, it just changed how you feel about it. And it really needs to be changed, or have a skirt down, all the way down. And I don't know why they left it, 2 feet off the ground or not. But, I mean, people are just huddled into a spot. If you're waiting from, if I got off the commuter that comes to the airport at 5 o'clock or whatever time it gets there, about 5, and waited for the commuter that goes to San Francisco, you would be frozen by the time you got on to that next. Anyhow, that's my spiel in it.
So we can look into who, because I believe that the Airport Express is its own service, but we can look into who we might talk to about those concerns.
Where everybody, it's where the MTA one drops you off, and then you catch whatever you want to go. If you want to go to Oakland, or you want to go to San Francisco, or whatever, that's the spot that the bus stops.
Okay.
And so they've moved it down from the old one. I don't know if anybody remembers where the old one was, but it's not a good deal.
We will follow up on that.
And I'm going to tell my MTA representative also about this.
Any other director reports? Okay, all right. Probably nothing new from CalCog, but I don't know, is there anything new from? All right, well then we're going to adjourn it at 3:49.